Let's unpack epistemology, ontology, and axiology. I would like to give this lesson a little warning. Please do not throw these words around at parties. There is no quicker way to kill the mood than to mention these three terms. Please only bring them up in class or around your academic friends. So first, let's do a little overview. These are the terms that describe the often unspoken assumptions about knowledge, people in society, and our values that rest beneath our favorite theories or favorite research. Each of them corresponds to a branch of philosophy, which can be very abstract, but let's not let that confuse us, because most people doing research don't spend vast amounts of time writing directly about epistemology, ontology, and axiology. The way it normally plays out is that researchers are just going about the research, and these areas or assumptions remain implied beneath the surface. The research will leave clues, and so if they're so assumed or beneath the surface, then why do we even talk about them? Well, understanding these three areas will help us gather a better appreciation and be able to compare and contrast different areas of research at a much more sophisticated level. So there is some payoff here. So let's start with epistemology. We'll go from general to specific. This is a branch of philosophy that studies knowledge or knowing. They ask questions like, how do we know what we claim to know? That's the classic epistemological question that you'll see in a lot of theory and research textbooks. A researcher might assume, for example, that knowledge is already out there just waiting to be discovered. And so it's our job as researchers to uncover this universal, unchanging, and absolute truth. In contrast, other researchers believe that people develop knowledge based upon how they perceive the world and through their experiences. That's how we create knowledge. Still further along this spectrum is the relativistic view that believes that knowledge is a social construction. In essence, whatever we treat as knowledge is knowledge. There is no universal or absolute truth. These are epistemological positions that are getting at this notion of knowledge. But like I said, most researchers don't spend many paragraphs in each given journal article spelling all of this out. They normally just get on with their work. But their research will leave clues. And I see that epistemology is most evident in the methods that they use to conduct their research. In other words, if they assume an objective reality, objective knowledge exists out there, then they will approach it that way. For instance, some organizational researchers do climate surveys. These are quantitative surveys driven by a statistical analysis. And the idea here is that if you ask the right questions, you'll get reliable and valid answers. And the results are meant to give you a snapshot of how things really are. In other words, there's an objective reality out there, and our survey is trying to show it. In contrast, there are other ways to get at knowledge, other beliefs about the best way to know something. For example, the ethnographic method believes that to really understand, to really know, you have to experience something for yourself. You can't study culture from the ethnographic standpoint, for example, from a distance. First-hand knowledge gained through experience is the best way to know. These are epistemological kinds of issues. Next, let's explore ontology. Again, we'll go from general to specific. This is the branch of philosophy that studies the nature of human beings. What is the nature of our existence as individuals in society, in the universe? Who are we? What are we here for? These are ontological questions. For example, do we make real free will choices? Do we make choices that influence the outcomes? Or are there forces that are determining our outcomes that are beyond our control? Another ontological question would be this: are we best understood as individuals, or is our nature best viewed as being part of a group, part of a social system? There's a movie called I, Robot, for example, an old movie with Will Smith. And in this story, there's a robot named Sonny, and he's very sophisticated, and he's trying to figure out why the guy who made him. What is his purpose? And that's an ontological question. There's a bit of dialogue where somebody asks him, Sonny, do you know why Dr. Lanning built you? And he answers, no, but I believe my father made me for a purpose. This is an ontological discussion. What is our nature? What are we here for? For me, the ontological assumptions beneath research and theory are pretty easy to spot. So, for example, if they're studying individuals, like through personality tests or trying to figure out people's traits, then they likely are approaching us as individuals in society. If they are studying groups and relationships, then they are likely assuming that people are best understood in groups and relationships, like through the communication field or sociology. Another look at this is how we are situated in society in terms of the larger forces that we face. For example, does a theorist treat people as if they are at the mercy of a system that is out of their control, out of their hands? Or do they focus on the agency that people have to influence change? Depending upon their position, they are taking different ontological positions or assumptions about their research, and you can usually see that in the way they write it up. And third, let's talk about axiology. Again, we'll go from general to specific. This is a branch of philosophy that studies values. They ask questions about the values that guide our research to begin with. For example, what do we consider to be good or bad, right or wrong, beautiful or not? What do we value? Another axiological issue is what values might result from or be the outcome of our research. Axiology often asks questions about the extent to which our research can be totally neutral, or does our researcher opinion come into play and our personal values shape how we conduct and write up our research? Also, should our research be seeking merely to understand what we are studying, or should we be studying something with the goal of changing society for the better? That's an axiological question. And if we want to change society, what do we consider better? In other words, what do we value? Would it be more economic equality, better health, deeper relationships? These are all axiological issues. Sometimes researchers and writers are pretty obvious about this, but not always. Martin Buber is a guy, he's a communication philosopher, and he's been very obvious about this. He talked about an ethical approach to communication that contrasted with a more mechanistic approach. So he talks about it, meaning I am a person, but you, it, are an object. But we really should strive for, as often as we can, I-thou communication, where I am important in the communication, but you're a thou. You're also important. You have inherent dignity. You're special as a human being, and I should treat you that way. We should connect through dialogue. See, he has an explicit value for other people, and it's going to shape the way he does his research. So when I first got exposed to epistemology, ontology, and axiology and began to take it seriously, I developed a much more sophisticated reading of the research that I was exposed to. I didn't see them all as separate and independent pieces. I saw them all as having similar or different kinds of assumptions that informed their approach.